And then I said something that implied there was a whole story building up to it, and this was some kind of punchline.
Oh, James, you always have the best stories.
Oh, well, I just hang around with the fun people, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Well, that story reminded me. We're hanging out with Phil and Claire tonight, right?
Who are they?
I introduced you to them at Greg's thing.
Greg?
Yeah, Greg. You remember we went to his and Tom's engagement party? And after that whole fiasco, we had Fiona's birthday party with Steven, and then Greg threw that get-together at his place, and we met Phil and Claire.
Yeah, still no clue who Greg is, let alone Phil and Claire. And who the hell's Fiona? And Tom? How is there so many people I don't know?
It's the friendship group that's connected to Stephanie and Susie. You know, didn't you go to uni with Rajesh?
Who the heck are these people? Look, I'm not coming tonight, man. I don't know anyone.
Nat and Abe will be there, though.
Wait, Abe's the one who brings the really nice red wine, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, grab your keys, you're driving. How to get me in a car is pretty simple. It's just make sure that there's one person I know and there is a drop of alcohol.
It changes the whole game. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP brought to you by POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James. Now, as I usually do, we've got some announcements before we get to the transmissions,
Of
what
course,
we're talking about.
of course.
I just wanted to say thanks for everyone for tuning in to the stream on last
yeah.
Wednesday. That was really good fun. Really enjoyed it. We will be getting back on the streaming train. And in the new year, we'll probably announce kind of like maybe, I don't know, like a monthly schedule of some description, just to let you know when we're planning to go live. But if you enjoyed it and enjoy all the content we make, of course, the best way to support it is on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast. There's tons of benefits, but you're supporting what Walt and I do, and we're gearing up for a huge 2024. So if you want to be a part of that, getting in on the ground level, as it were, yeah, jump at Patreon and help us out.
For sure. We also wouldn't be where we are now if it wasn't for the people over at Patreon. So, yeah,
For sure.
they're the reason 2024 is going to be so big. And you could be part of that journey as well.
Yeah.
We do have an incoming transmission, though, from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
All Commander games contain opponents, but your familiarity with these opponents will vary considerably. You should alter your engagement with these players accordingly.
Is this like, I'm assuming they're talking about like, you know, the people we play with, because you said familiarity. That was what the Space Commander said. It was familiarity. So like the difference between like our regular play group and strangers.
Yeah, I think
guess.
it's talking about like basically how much this varies, right? Because there's people who you play with who you know really, really well, and we've talked this before in like play group episodes and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was episode 20, so this is a bit of a revisit to these subjects.
But I think it's kind of maybe even also a revisit of, because that's the players that we're familiar with, like very much. But we also had an episode that was very much geared towards the LGS experience.
Oh, that was
like,
a very long time ago now.
Even longer. That was episode 12, which was Commander Etiquette.
Wow.
But I think this is kind of what they're talking about, right? Is they're comparing these two things. Because there's familiarity that you have with people you play with all the time, which is very high. You're very familiar with those people.
I know what decks sit in what deck boxes of yours. Like you could pull out a colored deck box and I'm like, I know what that's the Arami
Marin.
deck. Yeah, you know, the green and black one. That's Marin.
100%. But there are other people that we play with, and I'm sure many of us play with, who we don't know at all at conventions and game stores and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess the key thing here is the Space Commanders are saying you have to vary how you play, or vary the way you engage with the game depending on who you're playing with.
The episode is how to play with who you play with.
Yeah.
Like whoever you're sitting down at the table, this is like a guide to navigate, because this is the thing about Commander, is that it is a social format.
Yeah.
And this is how to navigate those kind of murky waters of it being a social game, and we are just playing for fun. I think that's actually probably a good place to start, this whole like social format, because something we spoke about ages ago was the social contract.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, so important to Commander, but it's actually a philosophical thing. I know how everyone loves when I talk about philosophy. So the social contract and social contract theory dates as far back in history to Socrates. There's actually a bunch of writings from Plato. You've heard of Plato's dialogues before, like between Socrates and any other Joe Blow on the street. There's basically a huge section in there, and he does it quite repeatedly, where he talks about this kind of moral obligation that is implicit in society. And that's basically what the social contract is. It's this implicit agreement between individuals that share a society. So, you know, as we share our game store, so, you know, it's tying in here.
Yeah, very good, very good.
To behave in particular ways. And usually it's for the common good of all.
Yeah.
99% of the time it's for the common good of all. And it's usually a little bit of a sacrifice of some kind of personal freedom to, you know, make sure that we're all behaving nicely towards each other and keeping the peace, that kind of thing.
It's pretty straightforward. Like, you know, it's kind of just addressing any situation in which everyone has skin in the game, right? Everyone has a mutual stake in whatever is going on. And
because you live in the country, because you live on the streets.
Even a friendship group is like this, right?
Yeah.
Like, we collectively meet up fairly regularly because we're friends. We all mutually have an interest in this thing going well because we all would like to continue to do this and socialize with other human beings. That's a nice thing to do. So, though, there will be things that we mutually have to agree to abide by. And I guess the way that social contract shakes out in Commander is a lot of these things are unsaid, right?
Yes.
There's an understanding that we kind of pretty much all have implicitly, like not in the forefront of our mind, but implicitly, that when we're engaging in these social places, there's a mutual understanding of like, okay, this is the way we're going to conduct ourselves for the benefit of all of us enjoying this.
I mean, you say it at the start of every single one of our episodes that we're here to have better games of Commander.
Yeah.
I think the Get Commanded podcast really started because we wanted to help people navigate the social aspects of this game.
Definitely.
I genuinely think our podcast, in terms of deck building and that kind of stuff, was a bit secondary. Something that's really important to us is this stuff, which is, you know, making sure that we're all in agreement, that we're all trying to have a good time and all making effort to make sure everyone has a good time.
Yeah, I mean, better games of Commander can come about because your deck works better and because you win more often if that's something that's important to you. But yeah, also you can have better games of Commander if you have the tools to navigate the very murky social waters of Commander as well.
And have fun. I mean, like the rules committee, even on their website, make the social contract a really important thing. I've actually got an extract from their website here. It says, each game is a journey the players share, relying on a social contract.
Whoa.
It's even explicitly bolded on their website.
Wow.
In which each player is considerate of the experiences of everyone involved. So it's like, it is such a part of our game, not even just Magic the Gathering, but specifically our format of Commander, that it's like in our rules Bible document thing. Like it says.
It's bolded too. I didn't know that was in there. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
It's important.
It is really important. But like the thing that they go on to say on that rules committee website is the fact that they kind of differentiate between these trusted and untrusted games.
We've talked about this a few times before, right?
Yeah. So just to like bring you all up to speed, like the trusted versus untrusted is what we were just talking about. There's like the trusted games are the people you play with most frequently, the people you know really well.
Yeah.
And then untrusted, strangers. These are people in the game store that you may have met once, twice, maybe you've played with them a few times, but this is a game where you're not entirely sure what could happen. And this is where the social contract's really important, because in a world where you're not entirely sure what will happen, that's pretty terrifying. But knowing that there's some kind of implicit agreement amongst all players at the table that everyone's kind of like silently agreeing to, that makes it feel a lot better. That makes you feel a lot more safe, in my opinion. Yeah.
I mean, it's the really tricky aspect of what the rules committee do is that they have to balance the way that they ban and unban cards and the way that they provide announcements and stuff for a very large contingent of people who play with people they know really well, who don't require very robust Rule Zero conversations. I'm sure we'll go into that a bit later. But also, this large contingent of people who will sit down at a table and say, hey, I'm going to play Commander, and 3 other people go, okay, we'll play Commander too.
Yep.
And there has to be some amount of commonality there. You're never going to get a game where everyone has exactly the same expectations of exactly what Commander is and what this game should look like.
I mean, that's like, what would you call, like, there's things like recency bias that go into that. Like,
Yeah.
you think that this is socially acceptable because you experienced a game just recently where it was okay, or...
There's so much. There's so much that goes in, and you don't... There's so much that's unsaid, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what that is because you don't know that player yet.
Well, when we say murky waters, we're talking like solid mud.
Yeah.
Like, there is such a kind of a vague line to draw in the sand with this stuff. But we're going to try and give you guys some advice of how to navigate this, I guess. And I think I feel like there's 3 main pillars with the social contracts in Commander specifically. And I think that they're all kind of going towards that goal of making sure everyone's having fun. Because at the end of the day, that's the point of the social contract, right?
Sure.
I think that being engaged and focused, being helpful, and being considerate are the 3 pillars to stand on.
I like that.
Do you want to talk about like being focused and engaged and what that means? Because I feel like that's especially in the settings that we're talking about here. Like,
yeah, well, we're talking about untrusted games here first,
Yes.
right? So, yeah, being engaged and focused, this is like paramount in an LGS setting, right?
especially like nowadays, how Commander has gotten so popular. If you have a Commander night at your LGS, I mean, our LGS gets like anywhere between 40 to 70 to 80 people in a night, and it's hectically busy.
Yeah.
And it's very distracting. So I think being focused and engaged is, one of the key pillars in these untrusted game environments.
Yeah, I think there's so much, there's so many things going on, right?
Yeah.
Like there's the game itself, but even within the game, you've got all the socializing that's going to happen within the people in your game, which is normal and good. That's what we like about Commander. But then like if you're playing at a store you go to regularly, there'll be regulars who are like saying hello to you. Trades often start happening when you're in a game store. People might want to go and buy some product. There might be some packs thereafter, or a product they've got to pick up from the counter.
Yeah. We have like a raffle that goes on at our game night. Yeah.
Which is, I think, like fairly common for a store to raffle off like free prizes and stuff at local game stores and stuff. So yeah, like you got to stay switched on. I think like at the bare minimum, your turns, right? You need to be extremely engaged and focused, right? You should, once it gets to your turn, like all the banter needs to slow way down. You need to like not be so like outside oriented of the things that are happening around you. Like just look at your cards, your board state, and the board state that you all share and go, okay, what's this turn going to look like? Focus on that, at least for your turns. It's like the bare minimum.
Well, I mean, that also kind of ties into that being considerate pillar as well, doesn't it? It's like if you're distracted on your turn and you're not making game actions, your opponents are sat there waiting for you.
Yeah.
And they're probably not going to have a good time because they're wondering what you're doing, or they think that, are you moving a phase, or are you not being clear enough?
Oh,
yeah. That kind of stuff.
Get all sorts of ambiguity when you're not sure exactly what someone's actually doing.
Yeah. And in the same vein, be attentive on your turn, but do not check out once you've finished your turn.
No.
Like, I think to be focused in a game is being aware of the entire board state. And keep in mind, Commander, you've got 4 board states to keep track of, not just 2 like in a regular 1v1.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more complicated, so you do need a little bit more focus and attention to keep track of it.
Especially if you're holding up interaction. Like if you have a removal spell, I mean, obviously like a counter spell is the most obvious one, right? You got to decide what spell you're going to counter. You need to be aware of every spell that gets cast. So that's going to be a big amount of engagement that you require. But even if you just have like a disenchant or some sort of effect that, destroys an artifact or enchantment in your hand, you need to know when something comes down that you're going to want to remove, because you need to like take the next available opportunity to get rid of it. You need to be aware of where you are in the turn order so you can find your best opportune moment for using that removal spell. Like, don't be the kind of player who goes like, when did
that hit the board?
Yeah, when did that hit the board?
Oh, I would have counterspelled that 2 turns ago.
Yeah,
like
straight up.
No, we can't take that back. I think that's something like you have to be focused, because in a game where it's untrusted, I hate the word untrusted. It feels like you're playing with like slimy people.
I understand why.
It's what the rules committee
versus trusted. Like it makes sense. But yeah.
How about we call them like, I don't know, surprise games. You don't know who you're playing with. It sounds more positive. Surprise! It's Greg.
Surprise! It's mass land destruction.
Oh, what a welcome surprise. Crying in the corner. But like, okay, I'm saying that it's really important to be aware of what your opponents are doing in these games because unlike in trusted pods in playgroup areas, you don't know what their stance on like, you know, rewinding the clock a little bit is, or like, you know, these awkward little things of being like, I don't understand how that worked, so I would have done this 2 turns ago if I knew that it would stop me doing this, or like whatever. A lot of trusted playgroups can play around that, but in untrusted playgroups or surprise groups, you don't know how they're going to react. So being on top of your game is important because it makes sure the game runs correctly. Keep in mind, we play the world's most complicated game. In the most complicated way.
I mean, like, you know, the funny thing is in trusted pods, that amount of adherence to like rules and whether you can walk things back can vary considerably. You know, you can play CDH with trusted pods where people go like, no, we're going through the steps and phases in the right order.
And if you don't declare it,
if you don't declare it, it doesn't happen. If you don't cast it, it doesn't happen. Like, you know, very much that way. And then you get the complete opposite. If you ever watch Commander at Home on YouTube,
they're like, oh, roll it back.
Yeah, they're just like, I wouldn't have done that if that was going to happen. So then they just like walk back like a full turn cycle sometimes and do something differently.
And I think that's like the thing that the Space Commanders are trying to tell us to look for here, right? Is the difference between it. And this is, if you're in an untrusted pod.
Well, you don't know.
You don't know. So you need to be switched on. You need to be engaged. You need to be focused.
I think it's worth assuming that people will be the most strict with the way they're going to adhere to this. Like, unless you know for sure.
Okay, for example, if you were playing a game of poker for fun with friends. And everyone reveals their hand, and let's say I got a 2-pair, but you got a straight flush. I can't then go, I want to roll that back. I wouldn't have bet $50 if Walt had a flush. I only had a 2-pair. Like, I'm not going to win against that. Like, you know, you sit down with strangers to play poker, you're not going to roll it back, are you?
I thought you were going to go the other way of being like, and then, you know, that would be okay. But if you were to go to a casino and play poker at the dealer's table, we'll be like, you know, guys, I put in that $100 really thinking I was going to win that.
Can I just grab that back now? I'm sure Crown Casino in Melbourne would be more than happy to give you your money back.
Do you want a bit extra, actually?
You know what? Come to the back room with us. We'll give you the whole vault.
That sounds like a euphemism.
Smacking the baseball bat on his hand.
You can have everything you've ever dreamed of when you're dead.
Sleeping with the fishes in the Yarra River.
There aren't any fishes in the Yarra River.
I doubt there's any life other than bacteria in the Yarra River.
You might be right.
Anyway.
Oh gosh, yeah, right. Commando, that's the thing we play.
The next pillar I said was helpful. Because I think that there is a huge part of the social contract that makes experienced players have a responsibility to new players, like almost a kind of obligation. I don't want to call it an obligation because not every player needs to teach a new player. I don't want to force education roll down your hand, but like I think that there is a little bit of an expectation, whereas if you are the experienced player in an untrusted pod and you're playing with relatively new players, maybe it's someone's first ever game of Commander. The social contract says you have a bit of an obligation to be lenient, to be helpful, to teach them how this game works. And don't take advantage of new players is part of the other. Because like the whole point of this is to get better games at Commander. It's going to be a terrible game of Commander if you we use the term quite a bit of pub stomping, which is the kind of expression, it's a bit of an Australian expression, pub stomping.
I've seen it a bit online. I think you see it around.
Okay. People know what it is. It's like where you kind of like downplay how good you are and then annihilate someone.
Completely obliterate the pod,
Yeah. So, I mean, that is a really social no-no thing to do, but you have an obligation to do the exact opposite of that, to help people, to make sure they know what the rules are. Even reminding them of mistriggers, that kind of stuff. It's the helpful side. It's just sort of, it's back to that social contract again, right? It's what you owe to people just by virtue of being in any social context, right? Like you all have a mutual stake in the game that's unfolding. So you also like, I've sort of said this like this before, but you actually have, and I think you should think about this way if you're a real spike like me, you have
an obligation to having the best possible game that you can. And if someone's new, you should make them the best possible opponent they can be.
So it's like a training situation. I see what you're saying.
It's like, you know...
So you've got another worthy opponent in the future to battle.
It's like, I require one opponent worthy of my skill. I will train you so you may be defeated by me.
It's very Darth Sidious, actually.
Oh, yeah.
It's very like...
Very Sith.
Yeah, like I will train you so one day you can take me down. You'll strike me down and take your rightful place in the Empire.
But from a more good person point of view, it's like the bare minimum, right?
Yeah.
So when someone's there and they're learning the game, you got to show them how to do it. I think you got to be careful about how you do this and also when you do this. It's very easy to slip into a thing of going like, in general, I think the way, but maybe this is just a lesson for teaching people anything, let people try something and then advise them after.
And let them get it wrong. I actually think getting it wrong is a huge part of learning. Like, I remember I used to, as many people know, I used to ride a lot of motocross. I used to race motorbikes. And one of the best things my dad ever taught me is every time you get a scratch, you know that you'll never get scratched there again. So my dad had this kind of philosophy of like, if you fall off and hurt yourself in all these different ways and make all these different mistakes, every time you hit your knee, you're never going to fall off on that side of the bike again. You know, like if you take that mentality to it, it's like every bruise is a lesson.
Yeah.
I didn't win many races. I fell off a lot.
I mean, your dad constructed a whole philosophy around how often you fell off the bike, so yeah.
Yep. He's a very good man and creating a whole philosophical construct to make his kid feel better about crashing all the time.
No, that's just good parenting. No, I think it's a really nebulous thing in Commander, right? Because there's the politics aspect to this, right?
Yeah, and that's a very... Especially learning Commander, politics is a whole realm that's very complicated.
Well, because so much of the way that very good politicsy players will politic is about advising people on what to do, right?
Or what the threat is. Or
you know, someone's like, oh, I've got this removal spell, I don't know what to do with it. Like, politics happens in most pods where people will be like, oh, I think it should be this thing.
Definitely not me. Don't look at me.
Well, that's the thing is there's this stake in the game, right? Which is like, I want my stuff to stay, so I'm going to obviously point towards the other things. But it's really tricky with a new player because their ability to distinguish between what is the politics that happens in every game versus like, I'm genuinely trying to help you is really, it's going to look the same to them, you know?
And it also, like, even if you say, quote, like, now in command, like, pretend you're a new player, right? Get in the character of a new player.
Hello.
You're playing a Traxxas, you found it, and you're like, this is the best commander you've ever found.
I have built this Traxxas deck because I like little men, and they're all little men in the deck, and the Traxxas is not a little man, but she's the only one who's not a little man.
Lovely to meet you, Greg. So, this is a situation in the game where we need to discuss what the threat is.
Okay.
Now, I'm clearly not the threat, but I have a stake in the game, so I might be the threat.
You have a stake?
Because there is this thing on my board that's very powerful.
Do you like it medium or rare?
A little bit of salt and pepper.
Okay.
Grilled on like one on each side.
You have a stake?
So I have a stake in the game, so I'm going to tell you that other people are the threat. But I could be the threat. But at the same time, I couldn't be the threat because I'm trying to convince you that you're not. Are you following along?
I'm going to attack you with all my little men.
And scene.
I don't know where that guy came from.
I have no idea. But you get what I'm trying to say, right? This like complicated back and forth of like, I'm trying to help you, but also politics. I'm trying to teach you politics at the same time. So I'm politicking, but I'm also trying to help you in actually making a decision.
And like, we're not even mentioning that they're trying to learn how the cards work. Like, that's just social aspect of like them using the removal spell. But they might be like, okay, I've decided I'm going to use my disenchant on your Atraxa. And someone's going to be like, okay, you can't.
It's not an artifact or enchantment.
Not an artifact or enchantment. It's like, okay, let's start again. Yeah, look, I think, but even like when you're playing with very experienced players, I reckon there's some amount of this as well. Because there's an obligation to just like, it's so easy to just do the bare minimum of like reminding someone of a trigger. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like, this is a thing where it's, like, different between playgroup to playgroup. Like, we have a rule that in our playgroups that if there is a May trigger and you miss it, you've missed that trigger. We play pretty hardball.
Yeah.
Of like, if you miss it, you miss it. That's kind of just the way it is. But if it's a trigger that is a must trigger, we use the judge ruling of when you notice a trigger has been missed that cannot be missed, it is put on the stack when it is noticed.
Yeah.
That's the rule that we play by.
Yeah.
But untrusted pods, who knows what they like? Like their regular play group might say, no, even if you miss a must trigger, you've missed it. Like it's your responsibility. It only gets put on the stack if you have that rule. So that's completely different to what we have as a play group. So there is a bit of a obligation for experienced players to remind even experienced players, hey, you actually have a trigger there. It's a must trigger. You need to put it on the stack.
Yeah, you need to choose targets now before we can resolve anything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think to sort of invert that, if you're the player who is the active player who's doing stuff and putting things on the stack, let's say, putting triggers on the stack, I think you have an obligation as well to explain what is going on as well.
Tying into like being focused and engaged on your turn.
Yeah.
But for being helpful to other players, make it really clear what you're doing.
Well, I think really good Magic players make it clear when you have the opportunity to respond. We've talked about this before when we talked about priority, but in a turn of Magic, there are actually about like 100 different times probably in that turn that priority in a Commander game is actually passing around the entire table. But the thing is, we just skip through most of them with shortcuts. Like we say, okay, I'd like to move to combat, and that is saying to the pod, would anyone like to respond to that right now? I'm
Otherwise,
declaring
I'm going to
these,
go straight to attackers.
Yeah, I'm going to declare these as attackers. Anything before blocks. Again, we're saying, is there anyone who wants to do stuff now? So there's little phrases
And that's a good
you can
Commander
use.
player.
Yeah.
Like when they say that.
It's like really good to explain, and even especially when the stack starts getting complex, of starting to be like, okay, I'm going to cast this. So just so you know, what we have now is this spell on the stack. I have this trigger here to draw a card, and this trigger, which is going to make me a 1/1 red elemental from my, what's the...
Young Pyromancer.
Young Pyromancer is going to make a 1/1 red elemental.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any responses? They now know not only like what they can respond to, they know the order on the stack of the things they can respond to because you've been a good Magic player and ordered your triggers. Like,
yes, you can make that 1/1, but before you draw a card, I'm going to blow off everything up.
Or someone could be like, oh, actually, now that I know that's on the stack, I'm going to cast Sublime Epiphany. Because now I have a spell I can counter and an ability on the stack that I can counter.
That's the dream with that card, isn't it? To actually counter a spell and counter like an
ability. It's like the only one you never resolve, right? You always make a token copy of a creature you have. You always draw a card. You always bounce something. Yeah. And you're usually countering a spell or ability, but it's very rare you get to be like, counter that spell and that ability.
When you hit both, it's like a new level of like ascension to godhood you get. It's like,
it's the ultimate blue experience. It's like, nothing you do matters and I'm a god.
I completely agree with you though. This is like...
I'm a god?
Yes. I worship you every night, pray to you. I hope you hear it. The other thing that I think with like even the stack, because I go as far as to use like Infini tokens to represent triggers on the stack.
I love when you do this.
Specifically with my new Savine deck, because that thing just gets madness because we copy spells and all that kind of stuff.
Representing copies with actual cards makes it so much easier to respond to, and that's the reason that Arena does that, by the way. It doesn't say like copy, the word copy on your screen. It shows you a physical copy of the card and another physical copy of the card on top of that one.
It helps me keep track of it, so I'm glad that it is helping others keep track of it.
Oh, everybody wins when you explain it properly, right?
Yeah. I think the next level to that is keeping your board state clean. I've talked about this a million times on this podcast. I am a huge stickler for having those thirds on your playmat, the top third being creatures, bottom third being non-creature permanents, middle third being non-creature permanents, and then the bottom third being lands / mana producing artifacts. My God. Keep it like that, and everyone understands what's happening.
Yeah.
The difference when you have such an untidy board where you have like a Chroma's memorial. Chroma's memorial in the top third, and then you have a creature in the bottom third, and a bunch of random stuff everywhere else. So hard to identify if you've got blocks or not from the other side of the table.
Yeah, I think I'll say that most people are pretty good at putting all the mana in the one place. Like, it's very rare you play against someone who doesn't have their mana at the bottom. So that's appreciated. I have seen people put mana rocks in weird places, but that's fine. But yeah, doing the next level of going, okay, there are creature permanents and there are non-creature permanents on two separate rows helps so much for when you yourself as the player are declaring attacks.
Like, how many creatures have I got?
How many creatures have I got? You go like, oh wow, I've got like 5 of these that are flying. I'm definitely going to swing all of those.
Yeah.
You might miss those if your board state wasn't so organized. But yeah, especially when you're blocking, when you're attacking, if you're the player who's organizing your playmat, if I'm
Yes.
attacking you, it helps me so much to know what you can block with. Like I have 100% attacked someone and then they've been like, oh, I block with this. And I was like, I didn't even know that was there.
Was
like,
that hidden under that Thran Dynamo? Like,
I
where
didn't know
was
you
the-
had
yeah.
any creatures with reach, or I would obviously not swing my 1/1 flyer at you.
Yeah.
You know, like
And this is being helpful to your opponents. If you keep
Yeah.
it clean, that's being helpful.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So what was the last pillar that we had there? We had be considerate.
Considerate. Yeah, and I think this is like a bit of a tie into both of those. Like, you know, you're being considerate if you are trying to help your opponents. You're being
Yeah.
considerate by being focused and engaged.
I mean, it's all the social contract, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But then there's all the normal social contract stuff that comes into play. Like, I know it sounds dumb, and I know there's a bit of a stereotype and a joke, but like, hygiene is part of the regular social contract that exists in society. And us Magic players, apparently, according to the internet, stink. So, like, there is a obligation for us to make sure the environment that we're playing in
Yeah.
is pleasant.
Oh, this is like, 101. If you're playing in the LGS or, untrusted pods, which
Yeah.
is the section that we're in, hygiene. Come on. It's the bare minimum. I think I said this last time we spoke about this, but like, just, even if you're like, you know, have a weird thing about taking a shower or you didn't have time, like, I get it. It happens sometimes. I have days where I'm not so on top of my, self-care or whatever. Bare minimum before you walk out the door, change the clothes you're wearing.
That makes a big
And
difference.
spray some deodorant. Even if you're not
done.
like actually clean, you know, you might be able to feel your skin that's kind of greasy or whatever. And you might be kind of like, oh, I'm a bit yuck. But it's like at the bare minimum, you won't smell bad, right?
Yeah.
Because you have clean clothes on and you have deodorant. You'll be okay. Just don't walk out the door with that stuff that you've been sweating in all day and you haven't showered and you went to the gym in the morning. Like, that's a bad time.
And most game stores have deodorant behind the counter because they know this is a problem.
Is it
So,
most
like,
game stores?
It
or
genuinely.
just our one?
No, I think it's most. Like, I've been to
Really?
a few
Wow.
others. I've been to a few other game stores, and like, you know, especially when I was like skating for transport.
Oh, yeah.
I'd get smelly, so
You'd
like
need it.
I would definitely want it. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to be the smelly guy, but like
Yeah.
I think that all the other social contract stuff that just takes place in society also takes place in a game store, like keeping your belongings together instead of sprawling out across, especially at a game store where table space is limited.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you put your bag on an empty table, you're
Don't.
just taking up room. Like, if there's a pod that comes in trying to look for a table, you're taking up room. Keep yourself tidy, keep yourself together.
Yeah.
And
Keep your bag at your feet. It's so
Yeah.
easy to do. And like that way you'd know where it is because it's directly next to where you're sat.
I've got an idea. We should start doing those. You know the announcements that you get pre-flight, just before you
Yeah.
take off on a plane, where it's like, please stow all luggage in
Personal
the overhead
belongings.
compartment or under your seat. If the oxygen masks descend, please fit yours before anyone else's. And then apply deodorant so we don't need the oxygen masks. But like, all the other stuff applies, like respecting other people's belongings. Don't
Yeah.
just grab people's cards, like, you know, across the table. Ask them
Oh, yeah.
if you can grab them first. Like, you know, I think we had a joke in one of our skits ages ago where I grabbed your cards with greasy fingers.
Oh,
and you were like,
yuck.
ew, it's
Yeah.
gross. That's a real thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it can make the other people at your pod not want to play with you again. So just follow all these usual guidelines. Be respectful. The game store isn't your home.
Yeah.
Treat it as a public place because it is. I know we spend probably more time at our LGS than our homes. I think even if you include sleeping, I would spend more time at the LGS than home. But like, it's not. It is a public space.
Yeah.
It is a store. It is a place of business. That owner of the game store wants to keep it clean. Everyone in there wants to use it, keep it clean and tidy. Just respect the space.
Yeah. Well, speaking of like a social contract, like pretty much all places that you live, unless you live literally alone, the social contract applies to where you live, right? If you live with your partner, or you live with your parents,
Yeah.
or your family, or housemates, or anyone really, you have a mutual stake in the game, which is the house that you all live in. You all have a desire for it to be a certain way, most likely clean.
Yep.
And so you all have an obligation to do something you don't really want to do, which is clean the house so that it's clean.
I feel like you're referring to our old share house there.
I mean, we were fine.
We
but
were
anyway.
good. But like, I mean, like, you think about like a share house is a really good context to put this in. Like, you know, when you're in a share house, there is this obligation, this social contract to respect and be considerate of others.
Yeah.
Like, for example, when we lived together in the share house, I didn't walk around in the nude. That's something I was considerate about that.
I was extremely disappointed by that, but anyway.
You could have asked. But like, I didn't do that. But now I live with my partner at home in private. It's okay if I want to walk from the bedroom to the bathroom in the nude. That's fine. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, the social contract changes. And I think that if you're playing Commander with a trusted bud, you can walk around nude. I'm so glad you got where I was going.
Right.
God.
No, look, I think, as always, when we talk about these things and we get bogged down in the details and stuff, I think it's always good to end on the importance of fun, right? We play a fun game, and all of these aspects of this are going to be making sure everyone is having a fun time. And there's like aspects of just fun that we can mention here, like making sure that you use a good Rule Zero template. We've spoken extensively about ours. We should really like just write a document at some point so people can print it off somewhere and use that. And even, you know, making sure you don't get super angry. We had an episode on how to handle tilt, episode 56. Like, you know, there's things you can do to just make sure everyone's having a fun time. And all of this really is that.
Yeah.
But like, that should be your main goal, I guess. If those are all little guidelines and little aspects of this, I think the goal that you have that directs all of this is like, is everyone around me happy and comfortable?
And having a good time.
Yeah.
That's like the whole point of it.
And is there anything I can do to make it even better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason we do that, to go one step further, the reason we are thinking about that and have that central goal is because we want this format to be as good as it can be.
Yeah.
And as be successful as it can be. And if we don't have that focus and don't have that goal, new players will stop playing because they're not having a good time.
Yeah.
And then there won't be any players left. And us old players will just be sat in a room with two
Monocrypt.
microphones screaming at the world, being like, someone play Commander with us.
Please, just one time. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's, I reckon, all we want to say about Untrusted Pods. So I think it might be time for a thrifty interlude.
A thrifty interlude. Just 5 cents and you get a whole break. A whole break. A rest.
I love this new thing of you just saying words after that.
I'm not planning any of them
I know,
either.
it's
It's
like
when you
so
say
much
it's like when you say thrifty interlude, my brain's like, do the thing.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Your brain's like, the word sent, the word short, break, sentence.
there we go.
There we go.
It worked. You know what I meant.
I do. We have lots to talk about, including how all of this stuff is going to change. We're talking about playgroups. But before that, we're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. And as is tradition, I will be performing a monologue. And this week, it's the Cowled Merchant with some new wares. James, would you like to read the card I'm featuring this week?
I sure would. This is a WinCon card and a half. I love this card. It's Mob Rule. For 4 red and a red, you'll get a sorcery that says choose one. You can either gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater until end of turn, untap them, they gain haste, or you can gain control of all creatures with power 3 or less until end of turn. Untap those creatures, they gain haste.
Do you get tired of the meaningless machinations of the government? Wish you and your friends could get through to the people in charge in a way that they couldn't ignore? Well then, welcome to the mob! What are we doing? Who are we going to punch in the head? Big time! Where are we going? Whoa, sailor! Everything can turn on a dime when people that are a little bit crazy are in charge. Nobody is answering my questions, but that's okay if you're going where the crowd is going. This rules! No, this rules! No, these rule collectively! But these rulers are enforcing the absence of rules! If you don't like it, they'll smack you across the back of the hand with a ruler, and I don't mean the king. Though if someone can smack you on the hand with an entire king, they deserve a promotion! To ruler! Get budgeted!
Man, that cowed merchant is now selling like crowds. He can literally sling anything in the universe.
The ultimate merchant. The
Ultimate sales
merchant.
guy.
Yep. Mad props. If you liked that, you can see those as they're released in text form every Thursday on the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server, which is linked in the show notes in the Thrifty Thursdays channel. So hop in that Discord if you want to have a read of those.
Yeah, and if you do like it, tell us why. Because Walt's just a weirdo, and we just let him be weird in that channel and on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for him, is what I'm saying.
40 minutes of Walt being helpful, and then a few minutes of Walt being insane, and then back to being helpful. And speaking of
our Discord channel, because who's in our Discord channel, Walt?
Our play
Our
group.
play group. And I think that's what we should dive into next. Because like the Space Commander said, you need to shift how you play with who you play with accordingly, depending on who you're playing with.
Sure. So we went extensively into untrusted pods. Cool. Done that. Trusted pods. We're talking about your play group. The people that you play with regularly. People who you're familiar with, whose decks you recognize. You're usually a bit more comfortable, a little bit more open to like just playing with these people. And so I think the adherence to the social contract changes a lot, right?
Well, like we were alluding to earlier with walking around the house nude, the perfect metaphor and simile to compare this to. I do think there is a big difference between the amount of the social contract you have to adhere to with a play group.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not like... I don't think it's just removing sections of the social contract, because you still should be kind. You should still be helpful.
Yeah, you should still be focused, engaged, helpful, considerate, all the words we used before. Yeah.
But I think that there are like social situations or like tricky bits, those murky water areas, where it's a lot easier to navigate with a play group because of the regularity and because of the familiarity you have with them. You might have navigated it before, and now there's just a new social expectation. Maybe that's what it is. Your social contract is more known. Maybe that's what it is. You know what your social contract is a little bit more with your play group.
You know your stake in the game because you know the game that you'll collectively have a stake in better. And so you also know your responsibility to the game that you're all playing because you know your relationship to it and the way that you all relate to it. Because that's the thing that was so hard before with Untrusted Pods.
You don't know.
No, you know what you bring to the table and what your expectations are, but you've got 3 others that are completely unknown to you. You obviously can never know entirely what's going on in anyone's mind. So even in a trusted pod, you can never perfect this, right? Because I can't be in your head, much as I'm disappointing.
You're in there pretty frequently.
But you know what I mean? I can't read your mind. And so, I know you. I know what kind of game you're after.
How I'll react to certain things and what kind of game I'm looking for, like you said. And kind of, if I have a shift in tone, you know where to go with that shift. Like if I go, okay, I'm tired of the really casual, silly decks that take 3 hours to finish a game. And I go, look, guys, I really want to play this deck. You're like, we're looking for that kind of thing.
Yep, you're pulling out Yuriko. I know I'm pulling out Azor the Lawbringer.
Yeah.
Like, that makes sense.
And I think that there are these kinds of social situations that I'm talking about that get easier to navigate. One of the examples I'd like to talk about is like the takes backsies thing that we were talking about earlier. Because I think that this is something that a lot of play groups have their own home rules on. And when you bring in someone from the outside, it can be completely different. Like we said before, take backsies is a really complicated situation to wind back the clock. But we've had rules in, like, because we're pretty lucky. We actually have multiple play groups. We have like, our play group that we play with probably most frequently is that group chat on Facebook that we have. Then we've got like the high-powered play group with a couple of our other friends, and then we've got like regulars we see at the game store that we've just been playing with for years. We've got a couple of different play groups. So in one of the play groups, we actually had a rule set up for a while where we had a 3 strikes and you're out rule.
I think I first saw this on some gameplay streams, and I know Tabletop Jocks still do it, where they have like an actual takesies backsies counter.
Yes.
And if you get to 3 of them, you lose the game. Right?
And I think that's where ours came from. I think that's where we got it from Tabletop Jocks. But yeah, it was basically like if you want to take something back, you get a takes backsies counter, and once you get your 3rd, you just lose. And that's kind of like a fun homebrew rule that helps you navigate with your playgroup this kind of like awkward social situation. But like most of the time, our playgroup, we're pretty hard and fast about it with this.
Oh, it's interesting. I think the thing we're pretty hard and fast about is asking. You know what I mean? Like
true.
I think both of us are pretty good at being like, okay, I don't think I would have done that if I'd known it was going to do this. Do you mind if I walk it back? But then equally, the pod is pretty good at being like, actually you've affected the board state too much, and then we're all pretty good at being like, that's fair, I'll
enough.
leave it.
I'll cop
But a
that.
good chunk of the time, we will let people walk stuff back if it's like immediate. Like sometimes I'll resolve a spell and they'll be like, oh, it doesn't work, never mind.
Yeah.
And I'll put it back in my hand, and people I think are usually cool with that.
Yeah, and also, like, there is a reason why your opponents might be like, yeah, that's fine, roll it back. Because they actually get something out of it. They got some free information
know
about
it's in
what's
your
in your hand. Yeah,
Yeah.
so they can kind of play around that. And I think that that's like a trade-off that you give with your
Yeah.
play group. It's like, I'm fine to roll this back, and with the knowledge that I now have this specific removal spell in hand.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a give and take thing.
Maybe that's a general thing, is that like mostly the ways that you get to change the social contract when you play with a regular play group are fine as long as you're not manipulating them. You know what I mean? Like
I think it's terrible when you start manipulating them.
I think the key thing here, and I've seen this said before about, because another thing you can do that's much more flexible with a play group is like the rule zero conversation in terms of what you can allow.
Oh, for sure.
You know, people might be happy to play against mass land destruction in a trusted play group because they know what the deck looks like and who's the commander and all this stuff about it. Or they might be willing to play an uncommander or a custom commander or something. But I've heard a really, really good sort of general philosophy of this, which is Dan Sheehan, who now hosts Pie Break, the podcast about the color philosophy.
It's in my queue. I need to get on top of that.
It's really good.
Have
Highly
you listened
recommend.
to the first couple of episodes?
I have.
Yeah.
Very highly recommend. He actually just released one with Rachel Weeks, which I haven't listened to yet, but the reuniting of Commander Sphere.
I might start there
with that
because
one.
Commander
Yeah.
Sphere was amazing.
Really cool. The first episode is him and Mark Rosewater. So
Okay, maybe I don't skip
You kind of got to start there.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, but the rule that he sort of proposed when he was talking about custom commanders and that kind of thing is it's fine as long as it's worse, was the way that he said it. Like, you got to keep in mind, if you're bending the rules of the game, which you're doing when you're playing an uncommander or a custom commander.
That it comes out like worse for you.
Yes.
Yes.
It has to be
what you're
worse.
saying.
Like, it has to be like it's very hard to justify if you're like, okay, I've got this illegal commander. It's like Corvold, but better. It's like, well why?
Corvold's already... Just play Corvold. It's
Yeah.
broken. Like, your Thursday Incarnate, for example.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's bad.
The deck has such a strong... Like, the card says if I cast a spell that has not been featured on Thrifty Thursdays, I lose the game.
Yeah.
Like, that's the level of bad that commander has to be.
Yeah,
Because
and-
it's a 5-color commander that effectively draws a card whenever I cast a spell. Like, it has to be limited.
So you're so limited in what you can choose to put in your deck. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think this is like maybe just a general rule of the ways that we allow flexibility in play groups. And maybe this is a bit of a cautionary warning from me, is you can do it, but be wary of increasing flexibility and always allowing for people to make choices that are better for them. Like even with mulligans, like, right? Mulligans is something I've seen
that's a
people...
good one. Yeah, like we have a friendly mulligan rule.
Yeah.
Where we just say you can keep drawing 7 until you find a hand that you're happy with. But
Yeah.
there is like a trust, a like implicit agreement between
Yeah.
everyone at the table that you're not digging for your best hand.
So-
like if you've got a keepable hand,
Yeah.
you run with it.
You need the trusted pod for that because you need to know that the people around you are not going to abuse that rule. But even I've played in other play groups. I once played with this group who very much, they played at a local game store. They play with each other every single week.
Mm-hmm.
I was just sort of a fly on the wall almost as the fourth member of the game because they had a lot of knowledge of each other's decks.
It's
and
got to
stuff.
be fun to be in those pods. I've
It
been
was
in them
fun.
a few times.
It was a very good pod. I want to
Yeah.
start with that. But they have a mulligan rule where they draw 10 cards. I think I talked about this before on the podcast. They draw
Yeah.
10 and then put 3 to the bottom. And effectively, it means you never have to mulligan more than once, right? Because it's very unlikely you draw 10 and don't have at least 7 capable cards there. But the issue is there was a turn 1 Soul Ring, like multiple turn 1 Soul Rings a good chunk of the time.
Yeah, I mean, 10 cards deep in your deck is it's over a tenth of your library.
It's considerable.
Yeah.
And you're picking the best 7 of those, remember. It's not
Yeah.
like you're choosing 10 and then discarding 3 at random. Like, it's the best 7 from 10. And
I also think that there's a way you can abuse that with deck building. I feel like you could make your land count a lot lower with that
100%.
mulligan.
100%
Yeah.
you could. And that's going to mean that then you're drawing more gas in the late game.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess I'm saying you can do this, by the way. I'm not saying like you should never do this, but be wary of always changing the social contract and changing the way you play with your play group in a way that benefits you all, because it just increases the likelihood of these blowouts and these sorts of things that will happen.
And I also think, like, you know, when you change stuff in your play group, you can end up going into untrusted pods. Like, you might, with your playgroup, go, okay, let's all go to a convention. And, 3 out of 4 of your pod go, yeah, let's go. And one guy's like, oh, I'm working that weekend. And they're like, oh, it's all right. We'll find someone to fill in the 4th spot.
Yeah.
And then someone else comes into your pod as that fly on the wall, and you've got all these kind of wild homebrew rules. You need to be aware that that pod is no longer your playgroup pod.
No, that's
an
an untrusted
untrusted
pod now.
because someone is coming into it. And I think you need to abide by what we talked about in the first half of this episode, the usual rules of what we expect when you're playing Commander.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's stuff about your playgroup that you can't not play. Like, I know what this deck is. I know what it does. I know what the threat cards are. I know how to threat assess it correctly. But the social aspect of playing the game, that pod is now an untrusted pod.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And look, it's going to be hard for that person coming in because there's so much knowledge of each other's decks and of the previous games that you've played as a pod as well.
I think that's something
and
that
as a playgroup.
I think that's something that playgroups do quite well, is holding grudges over multiple games.
It's interesting you say do it quite well because it implies that we should congratulate bots on this.
I am kind of congratulating them because it's a social part of the game that they're enjoying. Like we've done this before. I used to run Gingerbrute in my Yuriko deck. I still do because it's the best 1-drop in the game. You were always my target for Gingerbrute because you found the cards so funny.
Yeah.
And I used to swing it at you all the time.
Yeah.
And then you built a deck that had Gingerbrute in it.
A much worse deck.
A much worse deck, to be fair. But you, for the longest time with that deck, was like, okay, every opportunity I have to swing at James with Gingerbrute, I will take.
Yeah.
Because it's like this running joke of this long-standing feud between our Gingerbrutes.
Yeah.
And that's funny and cute, especially when it's just like 1-2 points of damage. It's not warping the game around it. I think that kind of stuff is good quality playgroup fun.
It's just like gags, right?
Yeah, it's
like
banter.
It becomes
banter.
a bit. It's
Yeah.
like, if I go like, oh, I resolved Gingerbrute, and then I like look meaningfully at James, like that's funny.
It's
already.
hilarious.
Like, it's there's layers of sort of irony and stuff that are wrapped in that.
And it's so personal to the playgroup as well. Like,
which is a good thing.
Yeah, and
I agree.
And I think that even the bits of like, one of our, good friends, Nick, he always plays the card. If he's in white, he'll always play Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah.
So there's always a joke about not attacking Nick when he's got open mana up.
Be careful.
Be
might Settle the Wreckage.
So it's like this running joke of this prior knowledge to all your games that come forward. And I think this is something playgroups do exceptionally well over untrusted pods, because in untrusted pods, let's say you play 2 games back to back and you've only just met this one person. Let's say that person absolutely crushed the game. Like they were playing Corvold, they had a 20/20 Corvold, swung at you, killed you, done. Just really quickly, game over. Then they go, okay, I'm going to change decks, do something else. If the pod goes at that player because they won the last game, that's not a good example of holding grudges over a game.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like one game with like 2 games and having a grudge from the first game coming over into the second game in an untrusted pod is not good, but years of playing together and having little inside jokes about particular cards, that is funny and that is encouraged.
Yeah, it's true. I guess I want to be wary of saying that it's not possible for trusted pods to get this wrong as well, because I do think, like, I remember we played with someone at PAX way back when, not PAX, Command Fest.
Command Fest?
At Command Fest, we played with 2 guys who played together a lot together. Fuzzy was one of them, actually, who is now a patron of ours.
Shout out
Fuzzy. Thank you. But with the other guy we were playing with, won't share names because I'm not sure if he wants it to be shared, but he was playing this weird, like, politicsy group hug kind of deck, and we immediately were like, looking at the cards and being like, we sort of, with our knowledge of Commander, were like, oh, okay, the group hug player is trying to fly under the radar. We were like, all right, we need to start dealing with him. And he like threw his hands in the air and like laughed. And he was like, I built this deck with no threats because every single deck I bring to my pod, everyone thinks is the problem because I'm always winning. So I tried to build one bad deck and I'm still arch enemy. Anyway, so it's like,
I did feel bad for him, to be fair.
Yeah,
but he ended up winning the game because I feel like we hard pivoted away from being like,
sorry,
he's
then.
fine. I didn't mean to upset you. We'll pivot away from it. But yeah,
it can happen.
hear what you're saying.
Over a long period of time, someone wins a lot, especially there's this kind of thing of being like, James has a soul ring, and I know he missed his last 4 land drops, but the fact that he has a soul ring means I have to
Kill
attack
him now.
And it's like, that's probably not so reasonable.
And I think just even just general stuff about how good the stuff of having a regular playgroup gets is Rule Zero conversations become so short.
Oh, yeah.
You know exactly what you're going up against.
We sometimes don't have them. Like, sometimes I pull out, I'll pull out, a Raumi, and you'll be like, okay, and you pull out...
Zaxara or something.
Yeah, you pull out Zaxara, and then,
I've seen the decks go up against each other before, and they work.
Theo pulls out Streffen, and, Nick pulls out Fabine, and it's like, cool. We all know these decks. We've all played against these decks at least once or twice. This seems like a good game. We don't need to be like, what's your win con?
Yeah,
and,
what are your removal pieces?
Yeah.
Even then, I feel like I could just be like, all right, guys, I'm going to play Savine, but I've upgraded 2 cards. They're pretty powerful. These are what they are.
Yeah.
That's the Rule Zero.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't have to go into exactly what power level it is.
No, you could even just pull out like the 3 saltiest cards. Is sometimes what I'll do, rather than do the thing of kind of pulling out, these are my 3 win cons, these are my 3 cards that might make you upset. This is my removal package.
Yeah.
I just pull out okay, what are probably the 3 cards most likely to bring about annoyance? So it might be a card that exiles someone's graveyard.
Yeah.
It might be Confounding Conundrum that makes you bounce lands if you play more than 1 in a turn.
Whack card.
3 of those, and then it's okay, these might be a bit annoying. Let me know if you want me to put the deck away. Otherwise, let's go.
Yeah.
Shuffle up.
And how good's that?
It's
I
great.
think it just makes it so much easier.
So streamlined, and I think it's so much more likely that you'll get power level right.
Yes.
Even with our Rule Zero template, we love it. We highly recommend it. It's not perfect because you can never know everything about every deck before you play.
But the only way really you can get a perfect Rule Zero is if you reach the point of that play group where you just go, I'm playing this deck. Oh, I'll play this deck because they played really well against each other the last 8 times we've played them.
Yeah.
That level of understanding.
Yeah.
That's where Rule Zero really shines.
Definitely. And speaking of Rule Zero, I know we said before we should jot it down somewhere. I do want to mention that the Command Zero episodes of this podcast are structured specifically around our Rule Zero. They're very long versions of our Rule Zero, but they're good indications. And only a few episodes ago, I did Catilda and Leah.
Yeah, and I did Tornos.
You've done Tornos Urza's Apprentice. Yeah. So if you do want to know the template, that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's a weird style of episode for us because we're on our own.
Yes.
Space Commanders don't tell us when it's about to happen. They just kind of yank us and give us a deck to explain. It's good
out of space. Yeah. It's good. It's good fun only because we love this game. Otherwise, it's terrifying.
Just sitting in a room talking about your own hobby for 20 minutes
in space.
I'll tell you what. Playgroups also allow for is, and you alluded to before, the knowledge of your opponents and your opponent's decks allows for you to alter your style of playing, not for social reasons, but for competitive reasons. To get that little bit of a competitive edge on your opponents because you know them so well.
Yeah.
And there's a plethora of ways you can do this. If you just identify, like I said before, with Nick, he's always the player that has that combat trick, that Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah.
I know I need to look at what mana he has open before I go to combat.
And probably consider how many attackers you send at him.
Yes.
Right? If
I am going to get blown out.
If you identify, this looks like it might be Settle the Wreckage, 80% chance. All right, I might send just enough to annoy him, but not to annoy him so much that he'll cast Settle the Wreckage.
Because maybe he'll get a worse attack from Walt later.
Yeah, make him work for it kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, me and you specifically have gotten very good at this to the extent where we were playing a game the other day and you left open 6 mana and passed the turn. I was like, oh, okay, James probably has Sublime Epiphany. And you literally were like, oh.
You know that whole thing you said about not being in my head?
Yeah.
Get the hell out of my head, bro. I remember this game. You had multiple opportunities in that game where you were guessing cards in my hand.
Yeah.
And you didn't get one wrong. Every single one you got right. And there was also opportunities where, there was this brilliant moment where I was counting mana and counting you could see I was counting very small numbers on my hand, but counting a lot of mana.
Yeah.
And you were like, Volcanic Torrent? Are you trying to count how many spells you're going to be able to cast? And I was like, I can't do anything in secret. I can't. He just lives in my head. Rent free, by the way. You're getting a great deal up there.
Yeah, cost of living crisis. Just live in your best friend's head, rent free. Best way to go.
But yeah, I think that when you know that much about your opponent's decks, even like about the type of player, like the running joke of me being the politics player and you pointing out to everyone at the table, like, he's losing.
Yeah.
Right now, if James is starting to politic, he's losing. Don't let him politic. Like, that becomes a really big part of your playgroup's game because you can feel it. And like,
well, you can game it as well, right? You can use this as a tool in your arsenal of being like, okay, like, we know James is politicking right now. It doesn't mean we can't politic with James, but like, let's be aware James, like, you know, you often start politicking, when you're losing, but also when you're about to start losing. So someone's about to remove one of your things and you start going like, okay, hold on, maybe we can remove, like, I can deal with this over here and then you can help me in this way. And then it's like, okay, let's just all be aware that James needs this thing a lot or he wouldn't politic with us right now.
So let's talk as a group about how we best approach this situation.
Let's consider this.
But also, like, if you know someone's the counterspell player, bait their counterspell. Bait them into making that mistake.
Yeah.
And you get the edge. You could put, like, you know, put your acting face on a little bit and be like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to cast this spell. Yeah. And then your opponent's like, whoa, idiot. Yeah. Counterspell. And you're like, well, overwhelming stampede, win the game.
yeah, straight up. No, definitely. I think when you see someone with the open mana and you know they're the counterspell kind of player, I actually like basically rearrange my hand. Normally I arrange my hand in terms of like synergy, like the best way to resolve the spells in terms of synergy. I actually change the way that I will resolve my spells from least to most important. so like, you sort of go like, okay,
Llanowar Elves
Thraben
first.
Inspector.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Cool with that? Okay. What about Disenchant, targeting heuristic study? Not so cool with that. Overwhelming stampede.
There we go.
Last spell in the hand. Yeah.
I think that there's like some amazing things about being in a play group, and the benefits we get from it are so big. I think there's a real like strong reason to make sure that we don't lose them, and I think that keeping your play groups healthy and happy is really important. Because they're the people that you love to play with. Yeah. So, I mean, look, everyone's playgroups might be different and there could be some different things, but just as some like regular advice to try and keep your playgroups healthy and happy, I think there's a couple of things that you can do to make sure that you're playing with the people that you love to play with as often as you can. I think the first one, encourage and support your opponents. Yeah. Because they're your friends, firstly. But it's very likely someone's going to get on a losing streak at some point, and then they might fall out of it. I think generally just being very, give a round of applause to someone that did a really cool thing in a game, even though it didn't work. I think that really builds up the hype of people, and that doesn't come from untrusted pods. I think that it doesn't come as often. And I think if you are in an untrusted pod, you should do it to maybe build a play group. Yeah. If you're trying to build a play group, do that. Yeah. I also think keep an eye out for the opposite. Keep an eye out for the arch enemy. I think the arch enemy is often someone in a play group or even in untrusted pods that can build up a reputation for being a really great commander player, and then
just
can
winning
often
a lot. Like, even if you win 50% of the games that you're in, that still means you're, like we've talked before about this, in a perfect world, win 25% of the time. So if you're winning 50% of the time, you are just warping the games around you slightly.
And I think that sometimes building that reputation can get you unfairly targeted. Yeah. And I think that if there is someone in your play group that it has built a reputation of being arch enemy, they might be feeling a bit unfairly targeted. But also on the other hand, if they don't feel anything like that, if they're just completely, unremorseful, maybe talk to them about down powering their decks. Or getting their decks to play in a full powerful pod, maybe. Or
swap decks. That's often a really good way for everyone to understand what is happening with each other's decks, and it's just like a fun way to experience someone else's deck. But if you play the arch enemy's deck and you just absolutely obliterate, then you can probably get to the end of that game and be like, okay, I think probably this deck may just be more powerful than the ones that we're bringing. Yeah. Do you want to take some cards out, or do you have some suggestions for our decks to make them stronger? Maybe,
or just try playing one of my decks for
Yeah. What if you play my deck for the next 4 games that we play? Yeah, just as something different.
I think that's big. And also, last but definitely not least, if you want to keep your play group healthy, do not run silver bullets. I think we've talked about this before, but if someone's playing a life gain deck and you're like, wow, they always gain so much life, I'm going to run
Stranglehold
or Stigma Lasher, where if you hit them with it, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. Yeah. Don't do it. It becomes what's known as an arms race, and you end up in this unwinnable race to who can beat it. And then the
Yeah.
decks actually lose what they're about. The decks become
Yeah.
more about being a counter to your opponent than being its own special thing.
Which actually then, when you move from a trusted playgroup to an untrusted playgroup with a deck like that, you find that you just can't keep up. Because while everyone else is just deploying threats and advancing their game plan, you're playing these cards that are supposed to answer things, and they don't answer things in this game. So you're just like, this is not good.
Why am I running this one card that only affects this style of deck
Yeah.
and no one's playing it?
And very few people, I will say, enjoy that kind of a deck, like when they're piloting
Yeah.
it, as opposed to a deck that synergizes and works well. Most of us are chasing there are exceptions. Control players love a deck that always has the answers. I totally respect that. For most of us, we're not that kind of a player, and you will have more fun with a deck that just is synergy.
Yep.
Still, like, by all means, play removal, play board wipes, like, have ways of stopping your opponents. Just don't make them silver bullets that only work on the Merrin deck. You know,
Yes,
don't
yeah.
play Night Soil. Like,
What's Night Soil?
I remember being recommended this when we first started playing at our game store, and it was very silver bullets-ish at the time. It's an enchantment, really old enchantment. You pay like 1 generic mana, and as an additional cost to activate this ability, you exile 2 creature cards from a graveyard.
From a graveyard.
Our graveyard, and you make a Saproling. So because you exile as a cost,
It
there is
can't
no
respond to it.
opportunity to respond. So if
Yuck.
someone's like, I cast Reanimate targeting Spore Frog, and you're like, cool, I Night Soil it away. It's like, even if I had a counterspell, it's gone.
Yeah.
The card is gone. I can't
Holy
do
heck.
anything about it.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that can get present in Silver Bullets. I realize I probably shouldn't have endorsed that card and
Yeah.
how well it works.
Yeah.
But it's
I
you
get what
don't
you're
need it.
saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the amount of time that the token deck that's maybe playing that card is actually getting the value of getting a Saproling is so low.
Yeah.
Versus how well it hoses the deck.
There's
like it's
much
like
better cards to create Saprolings. You know that.
100%.
Tender Shoot Dryad exists.
Yes, it does.
Now, look, I'm going to rewind the clock for us just a little bit.
Okay.
All the way back to episode 20 when we first talked about playgroups.
Yeah.
If any like OG listeners are out there, they would remember that we did a Magic Husband versus Magic Husband quiz
Yes.
of how well we knew each other in our playgroups.
Uh-huh.
We tied. So instead of settling the score,
Okay.
I like the idea that we're a team and we just know each other so well. And
We are magic married after
yes,
all.
yes, in front of almighty Richard Garfield.
In sickness and in health. Yeah.
for stacks or for land destruction. Anyway, what I'm going to do at the end of this episode for a bit of fun is we're going to do a Magic Husband like quiz thing,
Okay.
but we're going to work as a team.
Right.
So I've got 8 questions.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is we're going to choose who's more likely to. So
Okay.
but we do it at the same time. Now, if we pick the same person, so if the question's like, who's more likely to wear a purple hoodie, for reference, Walt's wearing a purple hoodie, and we go 1, 2, 3, Walt. Purple. Wow, off to a cracking
go
start.
really well.
This is going to go great. And we both choose you.
Yeah.
We get a point.
Okay, so we're trying to land on the same answer.
Yes. So we're trying to be very honest
Trying
with
to
each other.
mutually know each other really well.
Yes.
Okay.
And be very honest.
All right.
Because I don't think we win this game without being very honest.
All right. Let's do it.
So I'll say the question, then
Okay.
we'll go 1, 2, 3.
Say the answer.
Yeah.
All right.
And
And it's always going to be either
Walt
James
or James.
Walt. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't be in the middle.
It can't be purple.
Can't be purple. Can't be both. Can't say
Sure,
neither.
yeah.
You have to say one or the other.
Okay.
All right. Do you want to do the first one?
Let's do it.
All right. First question. Who is more likely to build with a new commander from the very latest set?
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
James.
Walt. Oh.
Really?
I reckon you're definitely more inclined to look at spoiler season and go, ooh, you could do something really weird with this.
That's true. I feel like you probably more often pull out a commander from you built Ukuma and Kazor is like one of the more recent decks you built.
That's
Those
true.
Like Commander 2020. And
Yeah,
you were like,
old.
oh, I found these and they're weird. I'm going to build them. Whereas I'm probably, okay.
I think you spend more time on Scryfall's
looking at
spoiler seasons than I do, personally.
I think it's tough for me because I haven't built a commander that's new in a while. Like the last
That's
commander I
true.
built was Babala Saga.
And that was Baldur's
I guess,
Gate.
yeah, but that was a few sets ago. But then Catilda and Leah was new
Yeah.
when I built it. Okay.
See, like the
No,
latest
I think
commander
you're
I
probably
built
right.
was Savine, which was like 2019.
Yeah, that's what you mean.
So,
All right, I think you're probably right.
yeah.
I think you're probably right.
All right, next question. Who's more likely to hold up mana?
Oh, okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
James.
Me.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. We're in agreement with that one.
That one's easy. We're at 1 point.
1 point. All
Nice.
right. I'll keep it on my hand down here. We've got
right.
1 point. All right. Next question. Oh, I think this will be an easy one as well. Who has the more unique decks? All right. 3, 2, 1. Walt.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
I have a sequence of blog posts about weird cheap cards that I like to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that your deck style is much more like I'm much more EDH rec. You're much more like Brewer's Corner.
Yeah, it's true. I'm like,
Yeah.
this thing's weird. Let's see what happens.
And I think that like goes to show like when we're in a play group, it's harder to understand what is happening on your board just because I've not read the card before. But you'll see a card that's on the front page of EDH rec on my board state and go, yep,
Yeah.
I get that.
I think I win so much of the time when people don't understand what I'm doing.
Your decks are the equivalent of throwing a flashbang in a room and coming in just confusion.
I feel like
and-
it's also like a Rube Goldberg machine where like if like Commander was kind of like if we were all at like an inventors fair, like we were all like, which is a card by the way, if we were all like competing, it was like, oh, you got an hour to make this cool invention, and it's like whoever is the most dangerous wins or something. There'd be like 4 people playing there, and like one person's like constructing a bazooka out of like a length of copper tubing. It's like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. And I've got like a matchstick and 4 small marbles and like a little flame, but a very small one. And then someone's like, well, that's not going to work. And it's like, well, actually, the matchstick hits the flame, which heats the marbles, which fires them into your face. Like, you know, that's how
and
I
the
win the
marbles
game.
are filled with lithium.
Yeah. Straight up.
All right. Okay, that's a pretty easy one to answer.
Yeah.
So we're on 2 points out of
Uh-huh.
3 questions. Going pretty well.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, this is a good one. Who keeps their board state the cleanest? All right. 3, 2, 1. James.
Yeah.
Yes.
This
I'm
is
proud
closer
to
than it
claim
used
this.
to be.
I will say you have gotten a lot better since I
Told you. Get your act together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also like, I think I'm more likely to just like gung up the board. And so I think in my defense, I think it's harder. Like when you run out of space, you run out of space.
Usually
You know what I
my
mean?
board has like mana rocks and 1 creature that's putting in a hell of a lot of work.
Yeah, and then like, you know, you have like an infinite token and a bunch of dice on it. Whereas so many of my decks are like, I have to have all the separate tokens because they're all
you're making a
different.
soldier,
It's like, I've got
and then you're making a
sapling and
human with
soldier,
lifelink, and
I've got a clue down
this.
here. This one's a
Yep.
treasure. This one's a food.
Yeah,
like,
this one's a copy of this.
yeah,
No.
it becomes my own fault for building decks like that, but it's hard to keep track of.
Stupid token decks is the answer to that.
That's the problem.
All right, so we're on 3 out of 4.
Doing
right?
well, doing well.
Okay. Oh, this is a hot one.
Okay.
Who gets more tilted? All right, ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
James.
Yeah, I think I do.
It's
I'm glad
close,
that I was
though.
honest on that.
It's interesting. I think lately I've been having a bit of a bad time in some of the games that I've
I
played.
will note, by the way, you self-admitted, I am your good luck charm. I went away for over a month.
Yeah, I won 1 game while you were gone of 15.
I'm just that,
And then you came back and I won twice last week.
do you want like a lock of my hair just to keep on you when you play games?
In a
little locket
by my heart.
with a photo. And,
That would be Magic Husbands, wouldn't
yeah,
it?
that really would. But I do think I get tilted more. I think I handle it okay.
You do.
But out of the 2 of us,
I think, like, relatively speaking, and just like as Magic players, we're not people who. No one's going to be like, oh, Walt and James. I definitely remember them as being people who get really tilted. Neither of us are that person.
never had that feedback
Yeah.
ever in our lives.
But I reckon, yeah. I think it's close, but I think you get slightly more tilted, yeah.
All right, next one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this might be another brutally honest one. Who loses focus in game more?
Okay.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
James.
Yeah, I don't.
It's just the way your brain is.
I think-
and
I
that's it's not an indictment. Like, you have
Yeah.
a very active and very like engaged brain in that you're engaged in all of the things. And when you're at a game store, like, you know, you want to talk to everybody and like sort that trade and like,
It's
you know,
it's in the game store I lose focus. When I'm at the kitchen table and when
You're
we're
great.
playing play
Yeah,
groups,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like so. And if anything, I'm reminding everyone else of their triggers. But
Yeah.
I think I'm just too nice of a bloke in a game store. Like I feel like everyone comes up to me and says hi, and I'm like obliged to say hello and tell them about my week and ask them
Yeah.
about their week.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah. I'll take that.
I
I'll
also
take
will say I reckon I am too focused. I think I get two. I get
Interesting.
blinkers on in a game. I've said this before, but I should be better at doing what you do, which is like going and grabbing a drink or like going and wandering and having a chat to someone just to reset myself, because I get like, I must focus. I must think about what my next play is going to be like.
Yeah.
What's being resolved? Do I have to cast my removal spell? I'm too in it. You know?
I agree, and I'm actually shocked that you don't flick cards, because people that are like that often develop like nervous tics.
Yeah.
And card flicking is just an obvious one in a game of Commander.
I flick them a little bit.
You do a little bit, but
Not
it's
as
more
much
like
as you.
shuffling and rearranging.
Yeah, that's true.
You're not doing it for the satisfying.
No, I'm not doing.
Yeah. All right.
We're doing pretty well. 5 of 6.
5 of 6 is pretty
Okay,
good. We got 2
nice.
more to go. Whoa, this is another brutally honest one. Who is the better deck builder? All right. All right, we're just going to do this. All
right. All right.
3, 2, 1, Walt.
Walt.
Yes, okay. I'm glad we agree.
Yeah.
I'm glad we agree.
It feels rough to say. I think you build decks that win more.
But I just think you build so many more decks than me. You can build a bigger variety of decks.
Yeah.
You're much better at making sure the deck is balanced in all aspects of the template. I do find that sometimes I'll be, too heavy on card draw. That's like something my Savine deck is like too heavy on. I'm drawing way too many cards. And there's points where I'm like, I might deck myself out.
Yeah.
Here.
I've said this before, and I still think it's true. I think if I'm the better deck builder, I think you're the better pilot.
Oh, okay.
I think once you're in the game, like regardless of the decks that you have, you will find your way to the win more frequently. And that was true in the stats, by the way. You won slightly more frequently than I did.
Yeah, very marginally.
In the games that I was in. But like even in CDH, you win a good chunk of the time. You almost won that CDH tournament a few months back now. But yeah, I think you're the stronger deck pilot. You've won Pauper like a bunch of times. I've won Pauper 1 time.
You only won once.
Oh, twice. No, because I won with elves while you were gone.
Surely
I think
it's
I've won
gotta be
twice
elves.
ever.
Yeah.
But I've been there a lot more times than you have. Anyway, interesting.
Well, maybe if you build me a deck and I play it, maybe I'm just unstoppable. I'll take over all tournaments.
What's the Dragon Ball Z fusion?
I'm thinking Power Rangers.
If we become Jolter.
I like Jolt.
Jolt is good. Yeah.
All right, we're 7 for
6
for 7
All
here.
right. So
got one
can we
more.
go 7 for 8? Let's see it.
Another brutally honest one.
All right.
Who goes in the tank for longer? All right. 3, 2, 1. Walt.
Yeah. I only know this because we've started playing over
On
spell table.
I was
and
thinking the exact same thing. There is a clock
There's a
in the
clock.
corner of spell
And
table.
sometimes I'm just like looking at my turn. And I'm like, maybe I could do that. I'm looking at the board and I'm like, what have you got over there? Can you just remind me what that does? Oh, okay, cool. Like resolve my spells. And I'm like, that wasn't too long. And I look at the timer and it's like 6 minutes. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I just had to think. It's hard.
I am the type of person that plans every turn in advance.
I do as well, but I overplan.
You overthink it when it gets to your turn. You're like, has anything changed?
Yeah.
Whereas I kind of just execute the plan.
Yeah. You're like, okay, I've thought enough. Let's go for it.
Yeah, and I think the only time I go into the tank is when I'm trying to get the W. If I'm going for the win, then you'll see me like put my hands on my temples and like properly think it through.
7 for 8 though.
7 for 8. That's
all right.
Really good.
Pretty
We're
good.
a good team.
We only got the first one wrong.
And I think on reflection,
it's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
It's probably the closest one, I think, between the two of us.
Yeah, and I just think recently you're probably more likely to build a new
I think you are right on that, but it was a tough one for sure. Well, there you go, the play group. We know each other fairly well, don't we?
And we're a good team.
Yeah.
Look, our game is a social game that has a social contract, but that's complicated and not actually explicit in what it is. Plus, it changes depending on who you're playing with. So being aware of the subtle differences on how you should treat our opponents in any given game can make sure that the fun is always happening all around the table. The format thrives, and hey, we might even be able to get a little bit of a competitive advantage on the opponents we see most often. So, Space Commanders, command received. All right,
nice.
Good. I love the episodes of Get Commanded where we like navigate these murky waters of it being a social game.
It feels like a uniquely Get Commanded thing. I don't think you hear it very often out there.
I think it feels a very unique Commander thing.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing a podcast about Limited, you're not talking about how friends interact.
Very rarely.
Very rarely.
Yeah. Not as frequently as we do. Like every other episode.
When was the last time you heard a modern player say, I had a fun time?
That is probably largely due to Modern Horizons 2.
Yeah,
to be
true.
fair.
So Ragavan and all that spoiled it.
Grief and...
Fury got banned,
Fury
though.
got banned.
Fury got banned. There's
Sea
the
of
news.
Scam is still crazy.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and Beans.
you don't come here
Beans
for
still.
modern, as we know.
That's true.
To the listeners,
To the
do you
listeners.
feel Commander? What do you think of your playgroup?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
tell
how-
us what you think of your playgroup.
How do you switch up your playstyle when you're playing with your playgroup as opposed to people at the LGS?
Which decks do you pull out?
Ooh.
Which decks are like reserved for your playgroup, and which ones are you most likely to be like, okay, new group of people, don't want to confuse them. Which deck are you reaching for? I want to know
Yeah.
the two different sorts of decks you have.
Yeah, I reckon mine would probably be like a Zaxara for an untrusted pod. And
You know
then
what that
a
deck's doing.
Savine Reclamation for a trusted pod.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit more chaotic, a bit more weird.
Longer turns.
Longer turns.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit more controversial.
That's fair.
But look, you can tell us all of your opinions on our episodes and just talk with us on all of the platform stuff. You can jump on X, Twitter as it used to be known, that's slowly dying, Instagram, or Threads. We're at Get Commanded on all of those. Go follow us on Twitch as well. We're at Get Commanded there too. And definitely join the Greensboro Commander community Discord server because that's where we and our playgroup hang out.
Yeah, you can meet some of the people who we talk about all the time, Nick
Yeah.
and Stella and all those wonderful people. And of course, the best way to support what we do is on Patreon. It's linked in the show notes, so you can check out some more ways to support the Get Commanded podcast directly. And we'd like to thank our patrons, Stella Tam, Fuzzy, and Bottomless Potamus, and an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting, who supports us in the Space Commander tier. You're all the best.
Yes, and I will just make a quick apology that there are some things that are going out in the post this week for you all. I apologize. Traveling around the world and getting ready for an international trip is challenging.
Oh,
so
to the patrons.
there'll be some
Sure.
things coming to our
Some
patrons.
goodies on the way. And if you want
very
some
soon.
goodies, you can join there as well.
For sure. And again, thank you, Palms Off Gaming, once again for sponsoring this podcast. These guys are awesome. They're the creators of the awesome blackout sleeves that I'm going to replace all of my decks with. They're so good. Binders, deck boxes, and all that kind of stuff. You can check them out at palmsoffgaming.com.au/hashtag Get Commanded and receive 10% off your purchase, and you get to support us at the same time. So go to palmsoffgaming.com.au/hashtag Get Commanded.
You got to do it, for sure. Well, it is tradition at the end of the episode to planeswalk out of Magic, out of Commander, into somewhere else. I think it's my turn.
It is. I talked about England last time. What's cracking in the world of Walt?
Well, you know because you're sitting next to it. I built
You wanna
a
talk about this?
computer.
Yes, it is like gorgeous. It's a white case. It's got RGB coming out of its butt.
That was
beautiful.
The main reason I upgraded was for the RGB. It makes the
Yeah.
computer go faster.
It's red stripes.
Yeah. No, it was really fun picking out all the parts. This was like my main task while you were away because I edited all the episodes. I had them all scheduled up like the first week you were gone. So I was
Yeah.
like, well, I've been meaning to do this for a while. I built my last computer in 2017. So it'd been about 6 years. So it was time for an upgrade. And I wanted to give my partner my old PC so she could have one. But yeah, for once I'll actually give the list of parts. It's a 7800 X3D processor. It's specifically for gaming. Got 32 gig of DDR5, 6000 megahertz RAM. There's a H100i water cooler and a RX 6950 XT graphics card.
I knew some of the letters and numbers that you just said.
Look, it's like
It sounds really impressive.
It's sort of like, so it's not like there are definitely more expensive processors and definitely much more expensive
But I saw the
graphics
amount
cards.
that you spent on it. You shared how much you spent on this.
It was significant. I don't want to lie and say I've got like the best that money can buy because unfortunately computer parts are insane right now and I have to spend another couple of $1,000s to get the best thing money can buy. But it's pretty good and it's been super fun.
Yeah.
It's super fun to build it and it's been like I've been playing like admittedly pretty low end games like Hades, and I played Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor, which is about 9 years old now.
Yep.
And for reference, when you're looking at your temperatures for your components, most components start to not perform so well once they hit about 85 degrees Celsius and definitely around 90. That's the absolute maximum. You don't want to go higher than that. And at idle, most components are sort of sitting at 40 to 50 degrees. That just means they're
Just
chilling
above room
out.
temperature,
Yep. For reference, for most of the games I've been playing, I think I'm yet to get my graphics card higher than about 55 degrees.
Whoa.
So it is
that because
miles
this water
away.
cooling system?
No, the water cooling's for the CPU.
Right.
It's just the graphics card itself is so beefy and has so much VRAM, which is like like the
It's not
ability
even breaking a sweat.
It's not breaking a sweat.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you could do so much more. And the next task for me is I'm going to mod the crap out of Skyrim. Because last time the limiting factor was that my graphics card was only so good, but my graphics card's a lot better now. So
I'm excited to see some potential streams.
yeah, look,
That-
I'm not going to stream on the Get Commander channel, but if I do decide to stream, me and my partner are thinking of streaming some Skyrim gameplay, just the two of us hanging out in our room and playing Skyrim. I build the modded playlist and then she just comes in and plays, and it's very
That sounds
fun.
like a great. I was lucky enough to just witness little bits of this.
Yeah.
Not streaming, just standing in the doorway and
Yeah.
watching, and it's very entertaining.
I'll put out a call just in case any of you
Yeah.
are curious when I do, if I do decide to do that. But it'll be a while off because I've still got to build the whole bloody modded playlist first. So there.
Yeah, well, it looks amazing. I mean, I love the white theme that you've got going on. I
Yeah.
think the white keyboard, mouse, and the case looks sick.
Yeah.
I'm keen. Are you going to get like a white mouse pad? I think that would look really clean.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's the one thing I might be missing. Yeah.
Because right now it's a typical Magic player's mouse pad. It's a playmat.
It's a playmat.
It's a playmat.
I actually gave my partner the my actual
The,
mouse pad that I had but I was gonna keep it, but then I realized that the mouse that she has now doesn't work without one. So
Yeah.
anyway, have to get a new one.
Anyway, well, look.
That's all we have time for. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander players.
Bye.